At Chipotle, we also have a playlist. Guacamole as it's being hand-mashed. The sizzle of adobo chicken on the grill. The chopping of onions and cilantro. We call our playlist Real. Order now. Chipotle. For real.
Hellmann's believes they can turn any mayo hater into a lover. So, if you know someone who thinks mayo equals bland, show their taste buds the truth and challenge them to try Hellmann's flavored mayo. With irresistible flavors like Hellmann's spicy mayo, garlic aioli, chipotle, and Italian herb, they'll be eating their words. Challenge haters to try Hellmann's flavored mayo and get them to eat their words. Learn more at hellmanns.com/eatyourwords.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. And today, I have a bit of a different format for you. I usually cover one case in 1 or 2 episodes, and then I move on to the next one. But today, I am bringing you a breaking case, a case that is actively being tried by the court system as I released this episode on August 11th, 2025. You may recall a few months ago, I told you about my new podcast that I co-host called The Alternate, Inside America's Biggest Trials. We covered the Karen Reed retrial in season 1, the Sean Combs federal trial in season 2, and we just launched season 3 last week. And we are following the trial of Georgia versus Mindi Kassotis. Now, Mindi Kassotis is a former active duty Navy JAG. That's right. So what I think about when I think of an active duty Navy JAG is I think of a few good men, people who are above board, dressed to the T, and just always follow the rules. Well, this case is far from a few good men. Mindi Kassotis left active duty after serving 10 years or something like that to pursue other endeavors. But now he stands accused of murdering his second wife, dismembering her, and then lying to her family about how she passed away, then marrying a third woman, all before he was ultimately caught. Of course, disclaimer, Mindi Kassotis is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And right now, my co-host and I are following this trial day by day. And just for you, you get to hear season 3, episode 1, right here in the comfort of the Military Murder feed. After you listen here, be sure to go straight to the Alternate podcast wherever you're listening today. Click follow and listen to our daily coverage because day 1 was just the beginning. This case sounds to me so far kind of like a catfishing story. It's a web of lies that involves a lot of people. With that, let's dig in.
Military Murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
So before we get into it, a tiny bit of background just to prepare you for what's to come. Here's the scene. It's a crisp December morning in rural Georgia, about 50 degrees. There's a group of hunting buddies who set out for a routine hunting trip in the dense woods of the Portal Hunting Club, and it's roughly 40 miles outside of Savannah, Georgia. One hunter sees a deer, takes a shot, and boom, he makes a kill. As him and a buddy walk over to the deer, they see something. The man believes that it's a boar or some sort of animal, but upon closer look, it's a headless, legless, human torso. They return to the hunting lodge to call 911, and that sets into motion an investigation that will lead into this trial. Welcome to the Alternate Podcast. I'm your host, Margot, former active duty JAG and veteran, and this is day 1 of the trial of Georgia versus Mindi Kassotis, the case of a Navy veteran and former prosecutor accused of not only murdering, but also dismembering his second wife, Mindi Kassotis. Day 1 kicked off with opening statements, and while the prosecution usually goes first, the prosecution deferred their opening statement and the defense opened up.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I introduced myself yesterday, but just so, again, y'all know who I am. My name is Doug Weinstein, and I am representing Mr. Kassotis in this case. It is my honor to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, my client, Mindi Kassotis, is not just an accomplished attorney and decorated JAG officer, who served his country in Iraq and in the Pentagon. He is also a man who lived in fear. Relentless, all-consuming fear. His wife, Mindi, also lived in fear. Mr. Kassotis is accused of the unthinkable, the absolutely unthinkable, murdering his wife. But the truth, what really happened, is far more complex. Mr. and Mrs. Kassotis were told that they were targets. You will hear testimony that a man calling himself Jim McIntyre, who knows if that is his real name, claiming to be with the FBI, told them that their lives were in danger, that they had to disappear, follow orders without question, and trust no one. Not their family, not their friends, not their loved ones. Every move they made, every lie that they both told, every strange decision, and there were quite a few that you will hear about in testimony, were driven by that fear. Mr. Kassotis lied to his friends. He lied to his family. He lied to Mindi's loved ones. He lied for years. Not because he wanted to deceive them, but because he believed that their lives depended on it. You're not going to hear testimony that Mr. Kassotis killed Mindi. You will hear testimony that he tried to protect her, but he was manipulated, controlled, terrified. And that fear, real and overwhelming, shaped everything that he did for years.
So that opening clip painted a picture of fear and some guy named Jim McIntyre. After this, attorney Weinstein described Nicholas for the jury. He grew up in New Hampshire, graduated from Boston College, got a JD from Northeastern and an LLM from Georgetown. And his LLM were in national security and cybersecurity, which leads me to believe that maybe the JAG Corps paid for it, but I might be wrong. Nick spent a decade as a JAG. He served in Iraq and at the Pentagon, and he left active duty after 10 years. He left at the rank of lieutenant commander. He was a prosecutor for some time, and he specifically mentioned Italy. He was married to his first wife, Heather, but they divorced in 2015 because his attorney alleged that Heather was unfaithful. He then married Mindi in 2016, and he left the Navy soon after. He served as a civilian for the Navy for some time, but then the defense starts saying that some weird crap started to happen. Nick contacts authorities, and some guy named Jim McIntyre appears out of nowhere. Jim tells them that they are in danger, meaning Mindi and Nick, that they are in danger. And this guy named Jim then says, you guys have to go on the run. But what are they running for? Or what are they running from? Excuse me. We have to backtrack a little bit. Heather, who happens to be Nick's first wife, and they were divorced, well, in the divorce, she got a $1.5 million judgment against Nick Kassotis. But this is what the defense has to say about that money, right? Because owing someone $1.5 million in a divorce is not something that is really that common.
And they have to go essentially on the run. You'll also hear that following Mr. Kassotis' divorce from his first wife, Heather, she gets a $1.5 million judgment as part of the divorce against Mr. Kassotis. In the course of providing that award, Mr. Kassotis was under the belief that he was the recipient of a sizable sum of money. But you will hear he never gets that money. That money was illusory. That money was allegedly being held by Jim McIntyre for Mr. Kassotis.
Okay, so I'm a juror, and at this point in the opening statements, I am very confused, but I'm definitely taking note of this. Well, it's because of this Jim McIntyre character that Nick and Mindi decide to go on the run, and they intentionally went off the grid together. According to Weinstein, Nicholas Kassotis is not a murderer. He's a victim of circumstance who became trapped in a web of lies and fear. The defense did not dispute that Mindi was dead. Of course, we have her body, we have her DNA, and he admits that her body was horribly dismembered. But they strongly dispute that Nicholas is the one who killed her or that he intentionally harmed her at all.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Buying a car shouldn't eat up your week. That's why Carvana made it convenient. Car buying that fits around your life, not the other way around. You can get pre-qualified for an auto loan in just a couple of minutes and browse thousands of quality car options, all within your terms, all online, all on your schedule. Turn car buying into a few clicks and not a full week's endeavor. Finance and buy your car at your convenience on Carvana. Financing subject to credit approval. Additional terms and conditions may apply.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
Weinstein told the jury that much of the state's case is circumstantial. There's no direct eyewitness or video of Nicholas committing the murder. There's no confession, and that there's a lot of connecting the dots, well, that the state is going to want the jury to do for themselves. The defense urged jurors to keep an open mind about the alternate explanations for the evidence. At one point in the defense opening, Weinstein addressed the many lies that Nicholas admittedly told in the aftermath of Mindi's death. Lies to friends, lies to law enforcement. The defense attorney looked the jury in the eye and said he lied because he believed their lives depended on it. In other words, any deceptive or odd behavior by Nicholas can be explained by his fear. He was hiding things because some shadowy threat, purportedly some guy named Jim McIntyre, told him that if he didn't, both he and Mindi would be killed. Weinstein argued that the state's evidence is all explainable without assuming that Nicholas is a murderer. Yes, Nicholas bought a utility knife, but it was a common tool, not necessarily a murder weapon. And there was no blood or DNA evidence that directly ties that specific knife, to Mindi's death. Yes, Nicholas bought plastic tubs, but the defense hinted that there could be an innocent reason or even that someone else used similar tubs. Yeah, Nicholas lied to police and even to Mindi's family about her being alive early on. But again, Weinstein insists it was all part of following mysterious orders to keep them safe. The defense emphasized reasonable doubt at every turn. They reminded the jury that Nicholas is presumed innocent and that it's the state's burden to prove he did this horrible crime. Weinstein ended by saying the evidence lacks a direct line to Nicholas, implying that when all is said and done, jurors won't be 100% convinced of his guilt because the puzzle pieces won't quite add up to a full picture. Next up was the prosecutor's opening statement. The assistant DA, Lori Bayo, delivered the opening statement for the state of Georgia. Her narrative of what happened to Mindi Kassotis is harrowing and detailed.
December 2nd, 2022. Is the week right after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving that year was on Thursday, the 23rd of November. That weekend for South Georgians is a big hunting weekend. It's deer season. You're going to hear that weekend Portal Hunting Club, which is located in Riceboro, Georgia, Liberty County, right near McIntosh Line. Down off I-95, Jones Road, that turns into Barrington Ferry. But it's right over there. And you're going to hear that there were hunters out. It's a family weekend. They were all out for deer season. You're going to also hear that Portal Hunting Club is a dog club. That means is that when they hunt, they use dogs to do the hunt. And the dogs run out into the woods and the deer run, and then the hunters shoot. And you're going to hear that one of those hunters shot a deer. And the dogs that he was using went to retrieve the buck. Dogs just weren't acting right. When he said come back, dogs weren't acting right. So he went to look to figure out what was going on. He did not expect what he found. He found a headless, legless torso, nude, completely nude, with two arms, one almost severed, her two legs severed, her head severed, just off the roadway. And as you can imagine, you will hear him testify. They were shocked, horrified. And I submit to you that the evidence that you will hear is that they returned to the clubhouse to try to get the police, to call somebody to come out. And you're going to hear testimony that that's when the onslaught of law enforcement kicks into high gear. They respond, and they get there by about 5 o'clock, 4:50 p.m. And you're going to hear what the hunting club area looked like. Portal Hunting Club and the area surrounding it, the adjacent territories, it's over 30,000 acres of logging territory. And they hunt on that territory with permission. That looked like a great place to drop a body if you're not from South Georgia, because that's a busy weekend. Logging, hunters, dogs. If you don't know they're there, I submit to you, you're going to hear that that wasn't a great place to leave a body, because they found it quick. Wasn't far off the road, and they found it quick. You're going to hear and see some of the information that law enforcement collected, where the torso was recovered. And you'll see those roadways. They're not asphalt. They're not like regular roadways of the highway, but they're still roadways. And the logging trucks use those. And there are cars that come through, and local citizens will cut through there when the season is going on because the locks are off the gates. And you're going to hear that people were coming and going. Lots of people. And over the next couple of days, you're going to hear what they found. But that very first day, on December 2nd of 2022, the crime scene investigator shows up, and they start documenting the crime scene. And I'm going to submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, counsel's right. I agree about one thing. There are tons of horrible pictures. And I submit to you that we will do our very best to limit what we show you. The state has a burden to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. And dismemberment, unfortunately, is what we were dealt. And we have to prove that. So we will present photographs to prove that. But the torso wasn't all that was found on that first day of December 2nd of 2022. Crime scene is going to talk about what they recovered there. And that investigator recovered not just the torso, but the tubs that were used to transport it. And I submit to you, you're going to hear testimony about the blood that was found inside of those tubs, that they tested it on the scene, that they knew it was first blood, and then that it was human blood next, because they can test for that. And they're going to tell you also about the knife. Counsel talked to you a lot about what wasn't shown. But I submit to you, you all assured us, and I'm going to ask you to use your common sense as much as possible. You're going to hear about that knife. A Milwaukee, orange-handled, black-sheathed knife. And that knife, ladies and gentlemen, had a cleansing wipe wrapped around it. Call it what you will. Clorox wipes, things you use to clean up. Those wipes were everywhere. There were lots of them that were recovered. Because the killer didn't want to leave behind evidence. I submit to you that killer was a prosecutor. I submit to you that the evidence is going to show that he would have known to clean up. And I submit to you that there's more evidence. That knife was purchased, I submit, the evidence will show, by Nicholas James Kassotis. If you look at that picture, the state will introduce it, you can see that knife tucked under his arm. That's him, on surveillance from Home Depot. And I submit to you that in case you were unsure that that was him, that's the receipt. Showing, if you look closely, that's his name, Nicholas James Kassotis. So I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, there's no question that the evidence will show that Nicholas James Kassotis purchased that knife. And if you look at that, he bought it at 8:56 a.m. on the morning that you will ultimately hear was the day her body was dumped. The same day, hours after. And you will hear evidence of exactly how we know that. You'll see the tubs. They will be here in this courtroom. You will hear about the DNA analyst testing the substances inside of those tubs and that it was Mindi's blood in those tubs. They didn't know who she was then. They just knew there was an unidentified torso. Those tubs also get bought at Home Depot. And you're going to hear how detectives from the Liberty County Sheriff's Office and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation ran down every lead they could. And in the beginning of this case, you're going to hear that there wasn't a lot to work with. You're going to hear they found a torso with no head and no legs. And that was all they had. That, the knife, and the tubs. So you're going to hear how they started with the knife and the tubs. And then it gets worse. Because while hunters are still out hunting, we find more pieces. Over a 3-mile radius, pieces are dumped with no regard, I submit to you, will be the evidence. Tossed into the woods. The heavier piece right by the edge of the road. But her legs, they're brought farther out in the woods. The second tub is recovered. I submit to you that was used to carry her leg. You're also going to hear how her head was ultimately recovered. First leg found by a hunter, separate hunter than the first crew. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear about all of the victims in this case, because although Mindi suffered the most tragic loss, no question, every person this case touches suffered. You're going to hear there's a second hunter that finds the first leg. And then you're going to hear that they do a canine search. They deploy the dogs, cadaver dogs, to try and find the rest of her. That their job was to try and find this whole person to lay her to rest. You're going to hear that a canine recovered with his handler, of course, the second leg. And I'm not going to show it right now, but you're going to hear how they collected maggots, fly larvae from that leg to determine when these pieces were dumped. You're going to hear from the doctor. I call him the bug doctor. He's an entomologist. Not that fancy. He's going to tell you when those bugs could have been exposed to her body and how that helped law enforcement to narrow down when she got there. That's the second tub. That was found next to the leg. And you're going to see where each of these pieces was recovered. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear that they were recovered exactly where Nicholas James Kassotis' vehicle was tracked. You're also going to hear him admit that he was there.
For opening statements, DA Bayo does a good job with really laying it all out there. So I played a pretty big chunk of her opening statements because for those that like video, I liked her visual aids showing where all the distinct locations of where the body parts were found. After this clip that I played for you, the DA walks the jury through Home Depot visits showing Nick purchased the knife, the bins, and even a shovel that she says was used to bury Mindi's head. In addition to tying Nick to the scene of Mindi's body parts, she also links his vehicle to those exact locations because they not only tracked his phone, they tracked his car. A car that this man purchased with cash. It cost close to $46,000. And then after he had purchased the vehicle and allegedly gotten rid of his wife, the vehicle was charred. Yeah, she showed pictures of that brand new vehicle completely charred. She says it's evidence that Nick was trying to get rid of evidence because remember, he was a prosecutor. He knows how to get rid of evidence. And what about the cleaning wipes found at the scene where the body parts were recovered? The DA is like, yeah, of course there were wipes. That's because he's a prosecutor. He's trying to get rid of all the evidence. She then moves on to the fact that Mindi was a Jane Doe for several months. You see, they took her DNA at the scene and even processed it, and they even took like dental records or they took like a dental sample, but they couldn't find a match in any of the systems. Then they went to genealogy to attempt to find this Jane Doe's family members. And that's when they found her mom, and boom, they were able to identify their Jane Doe as Mindi Kassotis. And actually, at the time that Mindi was murdered, Mindi was living with her husband, Nick, the man on trial, and her mother and father. And then the DA drops a bombshell. She tells the jury that right before Thanksgiving, Mindi was 8 months pregnant and not feeling well. So she decided to stay back when her mom and dad went on a trip. At some point, her dad had surgery, and Nick claimed that Mindi and her dad were two ships passing in the night because they missed each other at the hospital. Honestly, the storyline was really hard to follow. But wait, the DA then drops another bombshell. Where was Nick when Mindi was finally identified months after her body was discovered? Well, get this. In the months after Mindi went missing, that's after Thanksgiving of 2022, Nick Kassotis moved, changed his name several times. Then he married a woman who happened to be his mistress and settled in Pennsylvania. All the while, Mindi lay in a morgue as an unidentified Jane Doe. Here's the DA explaining the charges.
That's what the evidence is going to show. So let's talk for just a moment about the charges. You're going to hear that the state has charged the defendant, and you're going to listen to the court. So anything I say about the law, if there's any discrepancy, you follow Judge Rose. Malice murder, intent to kill. Every blow is an intent to kill when you're striking somebody in the head. Do we know if that killed her? No, we don't. But we know that all of those contributed to her death, and you're going to hear that from the pathologist, medical doctor. You're going to also hear felony murder, which is aggravated assault, where you intend to cause harm, serious bodily injury, but it ultimately kills them. So even if you don't think for a moment that at each blow it was intent to kill, felony murder is if I intended to assault, then they die, it's felony murder. And you're going to hear something about venue, where she was killed. Counsel pointed out quite a bit about what the state doesn't know. We don't. And the law in the state of Georgia, and you're going to listen to Judge Rose, specifically instructs on venue. It talks about either the county in which the cause of death was inflicted, which in this case, you're going to hear everyone say they don't know exactly when she took her last breath because her body was dismembered and tossed over 3 miles. But they also, under the law, it says, if a dead body is discovered in this state and it cannot be readily determined in what county the cause of death was inflicted, it shall be considered that the cause of death was inflicted in the county in which the dead body was discovered. The law anticipates cases like this. And I submit to you, that's what we have. Mindi's body was in Liberty. That's why we are here. You're also going to hear about concealing the death of another, trying to hide the death itself. You're going to hear about the possession of the knife, and you're going to hear about more than one knife, the deer processing kit and the knife itself, that Milwaukee knife. And I submit to you, you have to get through the flesh to get to the bones. And you're going to hear the tool mark expert explain, you can't do tool marks on flesh. You're going to hear about possession of tools for the commission of the crime. Those would be the Ford Explorer itself for transporting the body, the insulation knife to get access to the bones, the deer processing kit to potentially cut through the bones, and the tubs that were used to transport her, the shovel that was used to bury her head and partially one of her legs, and the removal of body parts. Because they got moved all over. You're going to see them all over that map. And then the tampering, those cleansing wipes, trying to get rid of biological evidence. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, a prosecutor would know that.
Wow, this trial is definitely going to be a good one. The prosecution's first witness was one of the men who accidentally became central to this case, David Lovett, a local hunter. Mr. Lovett is one of 2 hunters who discovered Mindi's remains back on December 2nd, 2022. It was a Friday. He's the person who made that horrifying 911 call that morning. On the stand, Lovett recounted in vivid detail how that night unfolded.
I don't think so. Was that the weekend after Thanksgiving?
Okay. Were you with any other hunters?
A group of us, yes, sir. Probably 30 people.
Now, describe for the jury when you're down there hunting how the hunting takes place.
We usually surround the block and then turn dogs out in strategic places and try to jump a deer and run a deer, and that's what happened.
Okay. And did you have another hunter nearby where you were?
Yes, sir.
Who was
Next
that?
in David Brannon. He was down probably a couple hundred yards from him.
So while you were out there hunting, did you see a deer?
Yes, sir.
Did you take a shot?
I did.
What happened after you took a shot?
I killed it.
On the spot?
Yes, sir.
Then what do you do after you shoot the deer?
Well, I went down there to look, and David, my next stander, he came down with me, and we walked down there and saw the deer. And that's when I saw the torso in the ditch, and I thought it was a hog because there's a bunch of wild hogs down there, and I just thought it was a hog. And David and I looked at the deer, and then we went over. He said, "What's that?" And we went over and looked at it, and it wound up being a torso.
Did you touch it or do anything
No,
with
sir.
it?
It was down in a ditch in the water.
After making this discovery, they immediately backed away, returned to the hunting club, and called authorities. It was through this first witness that the prosecution introduced their very first piece of evidence. It was a picture of their torso found that day. Next up was Lieutenant Anthony Brown, the first officer on the scene. Lieutenant Brown is a law enforcement officer who, at the time, was working with the U.S. Marshal Service Task Force and previously with local police. On December 2nd, 2022, He was one of the first responders to the scene after the hunters called 911. His role that day was essentially to secure the scene and begin the initial investigation until GBI crime scene specialists could take over. Lieutenant Brown testified that he was not familiar with that area where the torso was found because it was a remote location. He had to drive down like a dirt road, and then he had to walk in a bit with the hunters guiding him. Brown's testimony then walked the jury through what he did to protect the crime scene. He immediately instructed the hunters and any other curious onlookers. There were very few, right? Because this is like deep in the woods. And he basically was like, hey, everyone has to back away and not touch anything. He taped off the area around the torso as a crime scene perimeter. Brown also noted the presence of other items in the vicinity. Notably, he saw a plastic storage tub on its side and numerous used wipes or cloths that were scattered around, which he found kind of unusual, right? He made sure not to disturb those items either. Crucially, Officer Brown testified that he logged the names and contact information of the two hunters and any other responding officers to preserve the chain of events. He was essentially the bridge between the civilian discovery and the formal investigation. He called in the GBI crime scene unit and the Liberty County Sheriff's investigators once he assessed what they were dealing with. During his testimony, the prosecution had Brown identify a diagram of the scene that he himself had helped to draw, marking where the torso was and where other key items like the tub and the wipes were located relative to, everything else, right? This visual aid helped jurors understand spatially how things were laid out in the woods. On cross-examination, the defense asked a few questions aimed at timeline and scene security. For instance, how long between your arrival and when GBI arrived? And the answer was about an hour. And they also asked, did you personally collect any evidence or move the body? And of course, he answered no. Following Officer Brown, the state brought in the second hunter who was present at the discovery, Philip McCullough. Mr. McCullough was David Lovett's hunting companion that day, and his testimony served to corroborate Lovett's account of finding the torso.
The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox is coming to Hulu. In 2007, Amanda Knox was studying abroad in Italy. She had no idea her dream would turn into a nightmare. Inspired by the actual events of her wrongful conviction and 15-year fight for freedom, watch the new Hulu original series, The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox, on August 20th. Streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
But he was the one who found the tote and the knife.
Directly behind me.
Now, were you present when there was crime scene tape put up around the scene?
That was put up when we was escorted back to the main road.
Okay. And how long did you stay at the scene?
At the actual scene here?
Yes.
I was probably there an hour.
Okay. While you were at the scene, did you discover anything?
Not there, no, sir.
Where was it that you discovered something?
After we had been escorted back to the main road where we was told to wait on other law enforcement together.
And what did you discover?
A tote and a knife.
I'm showing you what's marked as State's Exhibit number 2.6, which has previously been shown to counsel. You recognize that?
Yes, sir.
What's it a picture of?
That's the tote that I found.
Can you see a knife?
It should be to the right side of it. Back here.
So you see it?
Yes, sir.
What color is it?
It was orange.
Or red orange. Does it fairly accurately depict the tote and the knife as you found it that day?
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you now this work with State's Exhibit 2.7, which has previously been shown to counsel. Do you recognize this?
Yes, sir.
What's the picture of?
The knife that I found beside the tote.
And it looks like there's white stuff on it.
It was a paper towel or rag or something. I didn't get real close to it.
Does it fairly accurately depict the
Yes,
knife and the rag that you observed that day?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so that was on Friday, December 2nd. But then McCullough testified that the next day, Saturday, December 3rd, he went back out to hunt. And that's when he made another discovery. But this was not at that same exact location. This was actually roughly 2.5 miles from where they found the torso.
And while you returned on Saturday, did you discover anything?
Yes, sir.
What did you find Saturday?
A leg.
Where was the leg?
Approximately two and a half miles from where we found the torso. Further, and the leg was actually in McIntosh County.
How far off the roadway was the leg?
20 yards.
How did you find it?
A buzzard flew up, and I got out the truck to see if somebody had shot a deer and not find it, and it was a leg, not a deer.
Mr. McCullough gives like an odd grin when he's testifying, but it's a very uncomfortable grin, kind of like, what are the odds that I would go out hunting 2 days in a row and be the dumb fool who found 2 body parts? Like, I feel really bad for this guy, to be honest. Next up was John Murphy. He's a retired law enforcement officer, but at this point, when he helped with this case, he was a member of the South Carolina Canine Search Team. Officer Murphy and his trusty search dog, a dog named Koa, were part of a specialized team that spent days combing the thick woods around the Portal Hunting Club, and they were looking for any other traces of Mindi. The DA directed his attention to Monday, December 5th, which was 3 days after the torso had been discovered. Sure enough, Koa alerted at several locations. Murphy testified that they discovered additional body parts and items hidden under some leaf litter, and he also described that part of the foot appeared to be missing, but likely due to animals. Murphy also described finding other evidence. For instance, they found a large plastic tote, and inside there was a red substance. And they also found the tote lid. But it wasn't like immediately with the tote. Near where the torso had been discovered, the dog also alerted in a ditch where clothing was also discovered. Next up was GBI Special Agent Brett Dickerson. He is also a forensics expert. Now, Agent Dickerson is a crime scene investigator and a forensic specialist with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Now, that stands for GBI. GBI stands for Georgia Bureau of Investigation. He was deeply involved in processing the remains and evidence both on site and back at the lab. He was responsible for processing Mindi's torso and her left leg, as well as the house where she had been living when she was last seen. Alive, that is.
Now, you indicated that there was more than one crime scene, and I was referring to the remains. Was there another crime scene that you also processed?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was that?
311 East 65th Street in Savannah, Georgia.
Okay, and why were you at that location?
This was after Mindi had been identified as the victim in this case, and investigation had determined at that point that around the time that we believed she was killed, she and her husband Nicholas were living at that residence.
Okay.
Through this witness, the prosecution introduced a PowerPoint presentation of the evidence that Special Agent Dickerson examined, in addition to pictures. There were maps and pictures of the knife, which was recovered with a sheath, by the way, and that was recovered at or near the torso, I believe. Then there was a tub, and they swabbed the inside of the tub, and they conducted a field test at the scene to see if it was blood. He also looked at cleaning wipes and a trash bag that had clothing in it and more cleaning wipes. It just seemed like there were so many cleaning wipes. Now, just so everyone knows, during the live recording or the streaming of this trial, because of all of the dead body parts, they're not showing a lot of the evidence that the jury is seeing. Even the evidence that they could show, the camera is just not panning out to it, just FYI. This witness then described processing the left leg and the maggots that were on it.
Can you tell the jury what, if anything, you did in addition to simply photographing this image?
So part of our training, we always try to determine a time of death. It's very difficult to do, and usually after about 72 hours, one of the best ways to do that is through forensic entomology. What that is, we'll have experts in the area of insect science who are able to take samples, either that we collect or that they collect themselves, and then are able to determine different things like what species of insect has colonized the remains, and then using very well-established standards for how long these insects take to basically go through their life cycle. They can then determine what they call a minimum time in which, minimum post-mortem interval, I believe is what they call it, which is just the earliest possible time that the remains could have been colonized by insects. So obviously we know she wasn't colonized when she was alive. That would have happened after she died. So in this case, we collected a sample of the maggots that were on her legs and then submitted them to a scientist at Georgia Southern University for study.
I apologize. Can you please describe to the jury what you had to do?
So we were given many tools to work with in the crime scene program. Nobody gave me a maggot collection device, so unfortunately I just used a gloved hand to collect a representative sample of the maggots and then place them inside of a plastic case.
This witness then described processing the left leg and the maggots that were on it. All right, so let's get to the processing of Mindi's house.
Further investigation revealed that she and Nicholas had lived at this address for a period of time during the window in which she would have died.
Okay. Do you know what their arrangements for the living conditions were at that location?
The residence was being utilized through Airbnb as a rental.
Okay. And when they rented at that location, did you know at the time you went to the crime scene who resided at that location?
It did not.
Okay. Can you tell the jury just a general description of what that location looked like?
Sure. It was a single-story residence in a neighborhood full of similar homes. Not a big residence. I guess I'd have to look at the square footage in my notes, but there were 2 bedrooms, 2 dens, and a kitchen, and I believe 2 bathrooms. There was a nice backyard that was enclosed, shaded with trees. There was a shed in the backyard, and the backyard butted up to an alley that ran through for trash collection.
Okay. And when you went to that location, how did you gain access?
We spoke with the owner of the residence and obtained their consent or her consent to search the residence and treated this crime scene.
Okay. So you were permitted to go there?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
And at the time that you went there in May, did Mr. Kassotis reside there anymore?
No, ma'am.
So at that time, the person that owned the residence was responsible for that location?
Correct.
Okay. So you got permission from them to go in?
We did.
And they granted that?
They did.
Okay. Do you take a signed document to ensure that you have some proof that that was the case?
So, yes, we do have a form that's just used for consent to search whenever we try to obtain that during the course of the investigation. I was not the agent who actually obtained that permission, but that is a standard practice.
Okay. And so when you enter the residence, can you tell the jury how you handle a physical crime scene like a residence any differently than perhaps the woods?
Well, this is a very unusual crime scene because normally when we're responding to something, this is to an incident that just occurred. In this case, we weren't sure exactly when this crime was committed. We had an idea at the time, a time range, if you will, but there had been a significant amount of time, months, had passed between when this crime had potentially occurred, and we weren't even sure it had occurred there. So we were going through to search this house, not really knowing 100% what we were looking for or if we'd find anything.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that there had been other residents inside of that dwelling in between December of 2022 and when you got there in May of 2023?
Yes, ma'am. So with the residence being treated as an Airbnb, there were people being moved through the residence from time to time. I don't have records and don't have access to those and have not had access to those during the course of my portion of the investigation. But as you can imagine, there were other people who were coming inside and out of the house.
So at that point, how did that impact what you did?
Well, as far as contamination goes, we pretty much treat this as a scene that's again, we're not 100% sure what we're looking for. To a certain extent, we just got to use common sense. We know that Mindi received some pretty serious injuries, as horrible as you can imagine. You saw the photographs, and we had to look for signs that may have occurred there. So the easiest thing to look for at that point was for blood.
Okay. Can you explain to the jury how you would go about finding blood that may have been left behind?
So, again, some of the tests that you saw, I described seeing physical stain, like a reddish brown substance, clinging to the side of a container or maybe on a piece of cloth. When we look for blood that's not visible, we look for blood that may have been cleaned up or maybe was deposited in minuscule amounts that's just not visible to the naked eye. We do have some chemical processes that we can employ to look for those and try to identify those stains where they are. The one that we chose to use in this case was called Blue Star. Now, you heard me talk about Blue Star OBTI. That's a presumptive test for human blood, but Blue Star is a product. They make several different products, and this particular one that we used is just Blue Star. It contains a chemical called luminol, you may have heard of before. Luminol and Blue Star both, in the presence of hydrogen peroxide, come into contact with blood and cause that blood to glow. So it's not like on TV where you may have seen a crime scene investigator go into a house and shine a black light around and see blood and blood starts glowing. That's not what happens. Blood doesn't glow under an alternate light source. In this case, we can use the blood, mix it according to the manufacturer's specifications, and then spray it in a fine mist. And anywhere that mist falls where blood is at a detectable level, and it's pretty sensitive stuff. If I remember correctly, it's about 10 parts per million that it can detect. And what it does is that blue glow that I'm describing is called chemoluminescence. It's the same way that fireflies or glow sticks emit light. It's not a chemical process that emits much heat, but it does emit a faint glow. So one of the things we have to do when we employ that chemical is we have to make sure that the residence is very dark. So one of the things, again, that we had to do to prepare to even spray the chemical was to go around and cover all the doors and windows with black plastic. We unplugged microwaves and taped over LED lights and things and made sure that the residence was as dark as we could get it, and moved all of our camera equipment inside, and then began searching the house using Blue Star to look for stains that could potentially be blood.
I'm now going to slide number 45. What's depicted here?
This is the bedroom on the southwest corner, or excuse me, apologies, not the bedroom. This is the den area, living room on the southwest corner of the house.
Okay. And are there any light sources inside of this room that had to be covered in order to be able to conduct the Blue Star?
Yes, ma'am. The doors there leading out into the back porch, or the back deck, and then the window, and also on the opposite side of the room is the kitchen. So there was kitchen windows that needed to be covered as well.
Okay. And inside of this room, was there ultimately anything of significance to your investigation?
Yes, ma'am. When we started searching with the Blue Star, one of the first things that we saw that gave us a positive reaction was the blue futon there, the cushion on the rear of it.
I'm just going to ask you once again, you said they. Are you referring to yourself or to someone else?
I am. I had help, assistance. And this is a fairly major undertaking to put up all the plastic and everything. So I had help from my team and additional agents that come in and help me prepare, and then stood by and helped me observe while I applied the chemical.
Okay. So were they assisting at your direction?
They were.
Okay. And were they in your presence the entire time?
They were.
Okay. When you say they assisted, did all of you then ultimately put up these tarps or obstructions to the light sources?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was there anything in this room that became noteworthy after you applied the Blue Star?
Yes, ma'am. After I applied the Blue Star, there were a couple of things. One, and the most obvious, was the blue futon there, the couch with the cover over it. The top of the couches were facing there on the left-hand side. Had a significant reddish-brown stain on it that actually, once we discovered it using the Blue Star, we flipped the light back on and saw that it was actually visible to the naked eye.
Is that the couch you're referring to there that I've kind of zoomed in on?
It is.
Okay. And did you then ultimately have the opportunity to capture photographs of the Blue Star reaction on this futon?
I did.
Okay. Can you explain to the jury, is it always possible to capture a Blue Star reaction?
So, no. The way Blue Star works is it causes a reaction that is basically transient. That energy that's being released in the form of light, once that reaction is over with, that catalyst occurs, it only lasts so long. So, and because some of the sample was actually consumed as part of that testing, is something that you can't just do over and over and over again and expect the same results. So and usually there's at least 3 applications that are involved in the recovery and documentation of any stain that we found with Blue Star. And it's the first one that we use to identify it. And that's when it first glows and we go, okay, well, there's a possibility there's a stain there. Then we'll set up camera equipment and we'll try to go ahead and measure and capture that. And then usually a third one to make sure that we get a good photograph. But that's not always possible. It depends a lot on the substrate or the material that the chemicals actually coming into contact with and what the blood is actually sitting on or in. And then how much has actually been deposited there.
Okay. So in this case, meaning with the futon, you were able to capture.
Yes.
Okay. I'm now going to show you slide number 46. Can you tell us what that is?
So that is what Blue Star basically looks like in the dark when you spray something that makes it react, usually blood.
And what is depicted in that image in slide 46?
That is the stain as we observed it on the rear of the futon.
Okay. I'm now going to slide number 47, and I'm asking you, can you tell us what is depicted on the area that I've zoomed in on?
So that's the same area of the futon, and again, you can see that reddish-brown stain there on top of it.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that's the naked eye as opposed to Blue Star?
Yes, that was visible, with or without the Blue Star being applied.
Okay. And now looking at slide number 48, what do you have depicted there?
That's the same stain. We just pulled the futon down. That futon, the stain would have been in the upright position on the back side of the futon. So we basically just folded that cushion over and then applied a scale there to give you an idea what size the stain was.
So I'm looking at slide number 49. Is that what you're describing?
That's correct.
Okay. So would it be fair then to say, where is that stain located on that mattress or futon seating area?
As it was oriented when we found it. And keeping in mind that, of course, the futon mattress can be placed in pretty much any configuration you want it. That stain would have been on toward the wall there where that metal portion of it is standing up against the wall.
Okay. Do you have any idea if that futon mattress had been moved?
No, I have no idea. It was that as you saw it in the first photograph is how we found it.
So I'm going back to slide number 45. Is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
And so, but you don't have any way of knowing if since December of 2022 that had been reoriented or moved in any way?
I have no idea.
Okay. So you just documented what you found?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, if you're watching this on video, great. You got to see that image. If you're listening, you may want to make sure that you watch because the stain on the futon was pretty significant. And when they showed that it was visible, that stain was visible to the naked eye, it got me wondering, how in the world did no one notice that stain? So right then and there, they did a test and they determined that that stain was in fact human blood. But wait, that wasn't the only stain that they found. There was also a stain on the floor, and it was confirmed to be human blood as well. But investigators wouldn't have found that stain on the floor if they had not been diligent. Because when they first got there to kind of inspect, there was an area of rug right above the floor. Here's the image of the blood on the floor.
Showing you slide number 53. What's depicted there?
This is the same area of flooring with the light turned off and just the chemoluminescence depicted in the photograph.
Was there anything that drew your attention as a crime scene specialist with respect to the pattern of that stain?
Ma'am, in my opinion, particularly on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see where there's a strong reaction. And probably, yes, ma'am, there. In the center of the screen, there's the brightest reaction. You see how it tails off to the right, to the bottom of the photograph. That, in my opinion, appears to be a wipe. A wipe is where we have blood that's been deposited on the surface and then something moves through it. as opposed to a swipe, which would be where something bloody comes into contact with the surface and then deposits blood on it. So what we can tell from this is there was a bloodletting event that occurred in this home at some point, and then it appears that it's been wiped through.
And with respect to that, the grooves, can you see them in this pattern?
Yes, ma'am. They move from left to right in the photograph.
And when you say from left to right, would that be from left to the right in the photograph itself?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you refer to the swipe, is that the correct terminology?
Wipe.
Wipe. My apologies. When you refer to the wipe, are you referring to this section at the lower right-hand portion right here? I'm going to zoom in on it specifically.
Yes, ma'am.
And that would be a downward motion, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Across the grain, so to speak.
So it was across the grain. Would blood normally move in that fashion on its own?
No, ma'am. I can't.
Speculation.
If you can testify as an expert in rendering.
He's been qualified as an expert, so I'll allow it.
I can't honestly think of a way that blood could have gotten into the grooves of the floor without also being on top of the floor. I mean, I suppose you could get a syringe with a tiny needle and put diluted blood in there and then get down on your hands and knees and insert blood into the grooves in the floor and make that pattern. But it would be kind of ridiculous. I mean, that's the only other way I can think of.
Okay. Now, when I look at that image of the flooring kind of lighting up, it kind of looks to me like the imprint of a foot or a shoe, but they don't ever mention this during the testimony, but maybe it'll come out later. With regards to more blood stains, the expert did testify that he also found blood on the wall behind the futon. But remember, samples can degrade, so they were not able to get a good picture of it before the sample degraded. Okay, before the day's testimony was over, the jury also saw two distinct totes, like live and in person at trial. They also saw one lid, and they saw evidence bags for some clothing items that were recovered near the body parts. But with that, day one ended with Special Agent Dickerson still on the stand. Day one of Georgia versus Mindi Kassotis started off with a bang. In just one day, the jury heard a compelling opening from the prosecution laying out a tale of a calculated murder and a surprising counter-narrative from the defense claiming a paranoid flight from danger. They then saw evidence unfold in real time through witnesses from the traumatized hunters who literally stumbled onto the crime scene or the crime to the methodical officers and agents who collected the evidence. Every witness today reinforced the prosecution's portrait of a grisly crime scene that someone tried very hard to cover up. One thing is certain, this trial has a captivated audience already. The details are so chilling, and the defendant's background is so unexpected. A former Navy JAG accused of such a crime. I think this is why this case is the talk of the town. And it's indeed the talk of the nation's true crime community right now. If you found this breakdown informative and engaging, please subscribe and leave a review. And make sure that you share the alternate with others who follow true crime and courtroom drama. All right, alternates, we'll see you tomorrow for day two. Until then, think like a juror, decide like one too.